Quantum technology. It's coming, and it will revolutionize communications, cybersecurity, and computing. Quantum computers work very differently than current computers. Most computers today are based on binary information theory. You know, ones and zeros, on and off, bytes and bits. Which, by the way, Claude Shannon of AT&T developed. What does that mean for a quantum computer? Well, they run on qubits. A qubit can be a 1 and 0 at the same time. It does all its calculations at once. That means fewer computational steps, so it can compute millions of times faster than today's computers. So that's great, right? Faster computers are better, right? But there's one big problem. Quantum computers will be able to decrypt our data as it's currently encrypted. Encryption that would take today's computers hundreds of thousands of years to crack could be decrypted in hours. To prepare, AT&T is developing next-generation cybersecurity strategies and solutions. So what is AT&T doing? We are preparing for a post-quantum world through 3 pillars. The first is technology. We're running trials of quantum random number generators, QRNGs. The second pillar is risk assessment. We're evaluating which AT&T assets would be susceptible to a quantum attack. The third pillar is crypto agility. We start with developing an inventory of cryptographic assets. What do we have? Who owns it? We're also evaluating new quantum-proof encryption algorithms. Eventually, we'll bring all these elements together so that when an encryption algorithm is found to be vulnerable to a quantum attack, automation can change that algorithm without the need to redeploy. Additionally, AT&T is engaging with standards bodies like NIST, QEDC, and ATIS to develop the next generation of cybersecurity standards for a post-quantum world. Quantum computers will revolutionize AI, science, medicine, and cybersecurity. Drawing on our legacy of innovation, AT&T is preparing to meet the challenges of a post-quantum world. This may all sound like science fiction, but sci-fi becomes reality. Arthur C. Clarke predicted communication satellites in the 1940s. They became a reality with Telstar in 1962. Again, by the way, developed by AT&T.
Please welcome Dan Solero.
To go, and I know you're interested in using the drink tickets on your badges, so but I want you to stick around. This is going to be fun. So our next guest is a world-renowned theoretical physicist, futurist, and an author with several New York Times bestsellers, numerous television appearances. You know him from radio, from the internet. His latest book here, which most of you should have in your swag bags, is called Quantum Supremacy and How the Quantum Computer Revolution Will Change Everything. He's been teaching at the City College of the City University of New York and holds the Henry Seamat Chair in Theoretical Physics at CCNY. As a co-founder, now this is where our experiences diverge a little bit. He's a co-founder of a major branch of string theory, and his goal is to complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything to derive an equation that perhaps is no more than 1 inch long, which will summarize all the physical laws of the universe, right? So I want to learn how to play drums better. We're a little bit different. So please, without further ado, welcome Dr. Michio Kaku. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, welcome, Professor.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so I have to ask, most of us know you from string theory, from your television appearances. What is it that caused you to want to write a book about quantum computers?
Well, I work on string field theory, one of the main branches of string theory, and we've come to a halt. We've hit a brick wall. And so the critics are saying, ha ha, we told you so. This is not the theory that eluded Einstein for the last 30 years of his life. It's a dead end. The problem is there is a multiverse of solutions of string theory. Think of a landscape with thousands of dots, each dot representing a universe. So there's a multiverse of universes. Which is our universe? To compute that, we have to do a computation in multiple universes. No digital computer can do that. Therefore, we're stuck. But then I said to myself, now wait a minute. Why not use quantum to solve a quantum problem?
Right.
This is a quantum problem. But digital computers compute with zeros and ones, zeros and ones, zeros and ones. Why should that have anything to do with reality? I mean, Mother Nature does not compute with zeros and ones, zeros and ones. Mother Nature computes with quantums. Everything is quantum in Mother Nature. So I said to myself, let's use the quantum to defeat the quantum. Mm-hmm. And so I got interested in the whole question of quantum computers, which is in its infancy. It's like a gigantic rocket just about to take off. And once it does take off, I think we'll find the theory of everything, an equation that eluded Einstein that would allow us to, quote, read the mind of God. These are Einstein's words. And so I think the enormous promise of quantum computers is that it will solve the ultimate quantum problem, the universe.
Okay, so that's a lot. And it's really, I just want to maybe pull back to, what is a quantum computer? I've read your book, it's fascinating, and thank you for writing it. You talk a lot about the history of computers and sort of what it is about a quantum computer that really changes the game. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, computers have gone through three basic fundamental stages. The first stage was the analog era, when we counted with sticks and stones and shells and levers and pulleys and string. Whatever we can get our hands on, we used to count things. That's phase one, the analog phase. Mm-hmm. And then right after World War II, or during that period of time, we realized that this is primitive. If you're going to crack the German code, you have to use electricity traveling at near the speed of light. And then with the coming of the transistor, made possible by Bell Laboratories, the transistor made it possible to create the digital revolution. That's the stage we're in now. But there's a problem. Digital computers compute on zeros and ones, zeros and ones, zeros and ones. Where in Mother Nature do we find Mother Nature computing with zeros and ones, zeros and ones, zeros and ones? Mother Nature doesn't compute that way. Mother Nature computes with the quantum. And therefore, we're now entering stage 3, where we're no longer computing with zeros and ones, we're computing with quantum waves. Now, what's the advantage of that? Well, take a transistor. It can be on or off, up or down. So think of a magnet being up or down. It can be zeros or one. That's the two states of a digital computer. A quantum computer and Mother Nature exist in all possible states, simultaneously, not sequentially, simultaneously in all possible states in a multiverse of universes. Now, you may say to yourself, well, multiverse, doesn't that come from Marvel Comics? Yeah, but where did Marvel Comics get it from? String theory, okay? Hollywood has discovered string theory. And so all the Hollywood movies, Spider-Man, Thor, whatever, they're all set in the multiverse, because that's the world of the electron. Now, we know the famous double-slit experiment. You probably heard about that. You shoot an electron through two holes, and it creates an interference pattern on the other side. How can it do that? Well, the electron interfered with itself. How can you do that? There are two holes. Did it go through the left hole or the right hole, or did it go through both holes simultaneously? Philosophers have debated this question. If you understand this, you understand the essence of quantum computers. An electron coming in goes through one of the two holes, not both, as some people think. It goes through one or the other of the two holes. But the probability of going through this hole or that hole is given by an equation, the Schrödinger wave equation. Mm-hmm. So in other words, electrons live in a multiverse of universes. Why don't we see this multiverse of universes? Or as somebody told me once, why can't we talk to Elvis Presley? I mean, Elvis Presley lives in the multiverse, right? Why can't we hear him, right? And the reason is we have fissioned. We no longer cohere with him. Now, I once asked Steven Weinberg, Nobel laureate, how to explain this really simply. Here's the best explanation I've seen of the multiverse. In your living room, how many radio stations can you hear? Well, in principle, a radio dial can spin around and you can pick up hundreds of frequencies inside your living room. All around the world, frequencies are in your living room. But when you turn the dial is on one radio station and it has decohered from all the other stations and you only hear one station. Okay, you got that?
Yep.
So out of the multiverse of radio stations, you only hear one, okay? Now, replace the radio transmissions with electrons.
Okay.
Now you have the electron waves of pirates, dinosaurs, monsters, aliens from outer space. They're all in your living room. People say, where is the multiverse? In your living room. It's right there, right in your bed.
Right.
That's where all the multiverse lives, right? So how come you can't talk to Elvis Presley? How come you can't talk to the monsters, the pirates? How come you can't do that? Because you have decohered from them. You no longer vibrate in unison with them. And as a consequence, you can only see your bedroom. You can't see what's there in your living room. So where is the multiverse? It's right there. Now, this means that a quantum computer is in principle infinitely more powerful than a regular computer because it computes in the multiverse of universes, okay?
Right.
That's the essence of why quantum computers can outrace any digital computer in principle, and already it's attained quantum supremacy. Quantum supremacy is the time when a quantum computer can outrace by thousands, millions of times an ordinary digital computer on select problems. We've hit that limit already. Now we want a general quantum supremacy. We're not there yet,
right.
But that's the goal. The goal is to have a generalized quantum supremacy, so it'll beat a regular digital computer on any problem.
Right. So I want to talk about, you're here at a security conference. We talked a little bit backstage about how we think about the challenges in front of not only AT&T, but our customers and industry at large having to do with asymmetric key encryption. And specifically about an algorithm that was developed here at Bell Labs in the 90s by a guy named Peter Shor. And in your book, you talk about why is it that quantum computers are now positioned to leverage that algorithm to effectively break some forms of encryption in near real time. So part of it is the just the quantum speed up. Part of it is the algorithm itself. But can you talk a little bit about that and sort of what you've seen in the research for your book about how different efforts are going to prepare to defend against that kind of attack?
Well, it all goes back to a young man named Richard Feynman, winner of the Nobel Prize, creator of quantum electrodynamics, who wrote an essay that created many of these wondrous atomic devices. And that essay was basically, there's plenty of room at the bottom. At the bottom, meaning at the subatomic scale, there's plenty of room. Room to build machines, room to build quantum machines. And he first proposed a quantum computer. He didn't know how to build one, but he said that sooner or later, we're going to have the ability to manipulate atoms. And forget transistors. Transistors can, you pack about, I think about 20 to 50 in one compartment is about the maximum you can squeeze inside a digital computer. But when you talk about electrons, you're talking about orders of magnitude below the scale of an atom. And so he said there's plenty of room at the bottom. But then how do you build it? It was an academic question until Peter Shor comes around and says that given a number, maybe 100 digits long, how long will it take to factorize it? Well, a digital computer may take a few thousand years to factorize a huge number that you can write on a sheet of paper. A quantum computer can do it like that. And all of a sudden, the CIA got interested.
Right.
all of a sudden, industry got interested. All of a sudden, it went from a very obscure field of science, reserved only for quantum physicists, into now the larger encryption community, realizing, oh my God.
Right.
Okay, everything we know can be thrown out the window. Think about that for a moment. Anything you know about digital computers, about subroutines, about how we factorize all the programs and the algorithms we use, all of that could become obsolete.
Right. Right, because a lot of our current encryption ecosystem is based around the arithmetic of factoring large prime numbers.
Right.
So if we've got a tool that can do that in a heartbeat, then we've got a problem.
Right.
So you did mention something in the book about two things I wanted to ask about. One has to do with just the current state of quantum computers and how much time, like I know you're a futurist, so put your futurist hat on. If you had to put a prediction, are we 5 years out from a quantum computer that can break current encryption, 10 years out, 15 years out? This is what we worry about a lot.
Well, first of all, they exist. Okay, quantum computers exist, and in fact, the greatest quantum computer creator is Mother Nature. When you go outside and you see the photosynthesis at work, you see fertilizers at work, all of this is quantum processes done by Mother Nature. For thousands, millions of years, these quantum computers have been at work. We, of course, have been not privy to that. However, now we're talking about the fact that we do have quantum computers. They exist. They're kind of clunky. They're very fast, but they're dedicated. They can only do one problem at a time. You have to reroute the whole thing. And there's two major groups, one in China. The Chinese have a very advanced system based on photons, photonic quantum computers. Photons travel faster than electrons, okay? So therefore, there's an advantage there if you use photons. But of course, wiring it up and adapting it to every single problem is much easier to use electrons than photons. But that's one group, the Chinese. They are very advanced in photonic computers. Then in the United States, we have several groups looking at different variations on electron quantum computers. Because electrons can be spin up, spin down, and spin anything. Okay? Think of a mouse in a maze. If you put a mouse in a maze and you ask a computer to calculate the path that it will take, the mouse goes through one way, and then you have to calculate left, right. It goes in this direction, then once again you calculate left, right. And then you calculate all possible paths from A to B. A quantum computer does it instantly because it sniffs out in the multiverse all possible paths. So you see immediately the advantage of a quantum computer over a digital computer. A digital computer sniffs out paths one by one, painfully doing that. While the quantum computer, it's a wave. The wave spreads out and sniffs out all possible paths to begin with. So quantum computers already exist. They're slow, they're fast, but they're dedicated. They're not generalized quantum computers yet. So I say within 5 years, we're going to start to reach quantum computers that are competitive with standard digital computers on, again, select problems. Maybe 10 years before we can outrace a digital computer on almost any problem. Because we're now going through an exponential curve. Before, we had a handful of die-hard enthusiasts, especially after Shor's lemma came out. Now everybody's jumping in the game. I was in Russia a few years ago, in Moscow, speaking to the physicists there, and yeah, they're on it. They're working on quantum computers too. Everybody that has a quantum group is jumping in the game now. Now, who's going to be first? I personally think that the country or the company that is first in building a marketable quantum computer will dominate the market. In fact, will dominate a good chunk of the world economy. In the same way, after World War II, a handful of computer companies dominated the computer industry. I think we're at another inflection point. Just like what happened right after World War II, the company that gets a workable quantum computer that's generalizable for many problems will dominate the market and reap tremendous economic benefits.
So in the previous talk, I know Anthony brought this up with Nina Schick about the confluence or the inflection point between generative AI and quantum computers, and we've talked about this backstage and in our preparation meetings. I found it fascinating the way you described the confluence of those things. Can you just talk about how you think about AI relative to quantum computers?
Right. When you talk about AI, especially AI done with chatbots, it's a question of software. And you can write software programs tonight. Software is accessible because it's a byproduct of the human mind. Quantum computers are byproducts of the human mind plus chemistry. You have to build these things, and physics. And that's a question of hardware. So hardware makes the software possible. The hardware today that we have with digital computers is making it possible to have chatbots. Quantum computers will increase the power of the hardware by millions of times. And that will then correspondingly reflect itself in software as well. And just remember that, most incurable diseases, why are they incurable? They're incurable because they operate at the molecular level. Why can't we cure cancer? Why can't we cure Alzheimer's? And why can't we cure all these diseases? We're talking about quantum biology, quantum chemistry. We're talking about doing chemistry and biology inside the memory of a computer. Now you may say to yourself, that's impossible. Biology is so complicated. Well, yeah, but ultimately it's proteins. And proteins are being deciphered using digital computers, and how they interact with each other will be done with quantum computers. So I think all the so-called incurable diseases that have afflicted humanity since the dawn of time will probably be cracked by quantum computers.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You spend quite a bit of time or words in the book talking about several different dilemmas that potentially quantum computers will be able to solve or help solve. And they all sort of come down to the same fundamental advantage of quantum computers, which is they can do a lot more things simultaneously with orders of magnitude more data. So if we can just dive into one of them really quickly. It doesn't have to be quick, however quickly you want to do it. The protein folding problem. You talk about this in quantum medicine and as it relates to ALS and some of these diseases that we still don't have cures for. Can you just talk through how you see quantum computers being used potentially, and how far out do you envision them being used for these problems that you lay out in the book?
Well, when we talk about medicine, we realize that it's basically trial and error. We like to think we're masters of medicine, but it's all done by trial and error. How do we find the next wonder drug? We get thousands of potential substances, put them in petri dishes, hit it with the tissue that you want to be cured, and you just cross your fingers. It's hit or miss. That's how the next wonder drug is created, by hit or miss. Now with the protein folding problem, we're able to pick apart like a skeleton, the gross overall structure of a protein molecule, but not the full structure. It's just the first attempt at the structure, because of course proteins can twist and turn, and that's where the magic comes in. They're able to adapt, to twist and turn into all sorts of things. Regular computers can't model that. Regular computers only model a protein as one solid object that is stationary. That's the limit of where medicine is right now. But with quantum computers, we'll be able to set the whole thing in motion. We'll be able to look at cancer. We'll be able to look at Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all the so-called incurable diseases, the diseases of aging, okay, at the level of the atom. Now, some people say, well, that put chemists out of work? Because who needs chemists? We'll do chemistry in the memory of a quantum computer. Well, chemists who do not use quantum computers will be out of a job. Chemists will use quantum computers. And the same thing, I think, with every other industry that we're going to talk about, that those people who do not use the latest technology will eventually go bankrupt or out of a job. Those that can harness this technology will thrive and have a job and have opportunities. Same thing with quantum computers.
There's another example I want you to talk through having to do with the Green Revolution, or a second Green Revolution. Can you talk about the factors of feeding the world and the production of fertilizers, those problems, and how they ultimately become data problems and size of data problems that can be potentially addressed with quantum computers?
Right. Well, of course, it was Malthus who wrote that famous pamphlet saying that eventually the population outstrips the food supply and there's going to be a worldwide catastrophe. Why didn't it happen? I mean, think about it for a moment. Yeah, population was rising exponentially, and the food supply was not growing exponentially. It was growing linearly. Sooner or later, the two curves would cross, and there would be mass starvation. It didn't happen. Why? Because a German chemist found out that it's possible to take nitrogen from the air, which is free, hit it with tremendous pressures and temperatures, and from that create the building blocks of fertilizer. And that created the green revolution. It's estimated that roughly 50% of the atoms of your body are due to this mechanism. Everybody here, if it wasn't for him, this population here would be half the size. Most of you would have starved to death by now. All because of chemistry. But these chemists, the process is so cumbersome it creates fires. Just in New Jersey last year, there was a huge fire at a fertilizer plant in New Jersey, and sure enough, it was this process by which you take nitrogen from the air and create fertilizer. Now, with quantum computers, we think we can untangle this. Because what is the home of the quantum computer? The molecule. That's the home of Mother Nature. That's where all the magic occurs. That's where life begins. Why is it so complicated to create life? Because it's all quantum mechanical. And that's what the quantum computer can do. It lives in the quantum realm. And that's why I think it could lead to a tremendous breakthrough in the question of immortality. I mean, why can't we live forever? The hydra, a small organism found in ponds, has no finite lifespan. It is immortal. You cut it up, it regenerates, and goes merrily on its way. Why do we have to die? Because of the second law of thermodynamics. In a closed system, everything tends toward chaos. That's the second law of thermodynamics. But notice I said, in a closed system. In an open system, where energy comes in from the outside, in principle, you can correct mistakes, you can replenish yourself, and perhaps live forever. In a car, where does aging take place in a car? The engine. Why? Because that's where oxidation takes place. Oxidation is aging. And we know where the mitochondria are like the engine of a car. That's where aging takes place in a car. And the mitochondria is where aging takes place in the human body. So quantum computers may give us a handle on immortality.
That's interesting. I think I could do something with that. It's fascinating. And so I want to get into one other area that I think is really interesting that you write about in your book, having to do with the role of modeling in a quantum system or a quantum computer to potentially fight against climate change with photosynthesis and simulating it. And I just want to talk about it and some of the challenges there, and sort of the one piece of it that kind of I don't quite understand. Maybe you can help me understand this. Is when we look at a quantum computer, at least the ones from Google, or at least the ones in the Western, I can't speak to the Chinese one. That one looks strange with all the mirrors. But a lot of the real estate for a quantum computer these days is associated with cooling, trying to get the system cooled to a very, very low number. But in nature, these things happen at room temperature. And what are your thoughts on that? And is that a challenge that's being looked into by physicists and researchers?
That's the number one problem, because decoherence takes place. Everything is coherent at very low temperatures, but at higher temperatures, everything becomes incoherent, and you're back to ground zero again. Now, how does Mother Nature do it? Mother Nature does it by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that if the time frame at which these chemical reactions take place is very, very small, almost instantaneous, then the temperature does not have to be near absolute zero by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So Mother Nature has conquered it. You walk outside, there's photosynthesis, as I mentioned. There's fertilizers on the ground. There's life. Animals breathing, animals walking around. And you realize, oh my God, it's all quantum mechanical at room temperatures. So in other words, it is possible to create a room temperature a room temperature quantum computer. Except technically we don't know how to master that problem, a very, very small time frame. Mother Nature has done it. Mother Nature is still one step ahead of us, okay? We're not there yet. So we have to cool things down to near absolute zero. And when you see pictures of quantum computers, they look like chandeliers, right? Now where's the quantum computer? At the very bottom.
Right.
The chandelier is cooling pipes. The actual quantum computer is about that big, okay? But you need all this chandelier in order to cool it down to near absolute zero.
Right. Can we pivot a little bit to, so not only are you at a security conference, you're at a security conference hosted by a communications company. So it wouldn't be an AT&T talk if we didn't talk about communications and connectivity. And using quantum theory and quantum electrodynamics, there's this opportunity to revolutionize or at least impact the way we build communications networks and communicate securely and privately and with confidentiality in the future. What are your thoughts on that? And in your research for the book, where do you think we are state of the art in terms of quantum communications?
Well, I think in the short term, once we have quantum computers that pose a potential danger, we're going to have to increase the size of the lattice. Now, think of a lattice like a screen, a lattice with different points. Take 2 points and calculate the shortest distance between 2 points given a certain path. Well, that's a very hard calculation. Now go to hyperspace, not just 2 dimensions, but n-dimensional hyperspace, and have a screen, a lattice, with points floating in n-dimensional hyperspace. Take 2 points, calculate the shortest distance between 2 points. That's a lot of work, okay? And that's what we use today. It means that in the short term, we'll have to increase the size of the lattice. As criminals start to get into this game, we're going to have to increase the size of the lattice to be one step ahead of the criminals. But I personally think that it may be possible to be in front of the criminals totally by having 2 quantum networks. In other words, use quantum to defeat the quantum. And that is laser cryptography. Take a laser beam. A laser beam has an orientation, a polarization, okay? Once someone tampers into that laser beam, the polarization changes by the Heisenberg inserting principle, okay? Once you know that the polarization vector has changed, you know somebody is trying to listen in on your conversation. So I think that's how it's going to go. We're going to have a multi-layered internet. One internet for you and me and everybody that just gets on, wants to have a joke, wants to have fun on the internet. That's one level of internet. But the higher levels of the internet will be banks, CIA, security agencies. They will have their internet on polarization vectors. That is polarized laser light. This already exists. This is not cutting-edge technology. It's just a question of mass producing it. I think that's one way it could go. For the top secret transmissions, corporations will pay a premium to get on this internet, which cannot be broken by the laws of the quantum theory.
Yeah, fascinating. I think just bringing it back to where we are today, so you laid out in the book a really fascinating view of what the future might look like and some really incredible potential benefits of quantum computers. And I'll speak for myself. I don't want to put words in any of y'all's mouths, but I think about how quantum computers are evolving as a clear and present danger. We have a whole global economy that's built around asymmetric and symmetric cryptography that's predicated on factoring large prime numbers. This is going to be a problem. But then you've also laid out there's tremendous potential value to society and potentially that one company that gets there first. So do you have a call to action or a message for the security community here while you've got audience with us?
I think NIST got it right by saying that The future is coming. It's not here yet. There's time. We have time, but if you wait too long, sooner or later, you could be whipsawed. So I think Niz got it right. I'm paraphrasing it, basically saying that now is not the time to declare an emergency. It's still early. We have time. But you wait too long, and the emergency catches up to you, and you can go bankrupt. And just realize the first companies or nations which can market a quantum computer that's all-purpose will dominate the world economy. Everyone will want that. Who wants to have this ancient abacus called the digital computer? Okay? The digital computer will be found basically in one place, the garbage can.
Got it. Like all those CRT monitors. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to ask about, so you've talked a lot about the history of computing, and in earlier talks today, there was a lot of reference to we need to learn lessons from the past. We need to apply what we've learned in the past to emerging technologies and the future. What kinds of lessons from other revolutionary changes, whether it's the information age or the industrial age, do you think we should be thinking about and bringing forward as we enter into or get ready to enter into this new quantum age?
Well, I think we have to be one step ahead of the game, even though it borders on science fiction, right? As long as it's consistent with quantum mechanics, which is the ultimate theory of the world, as long as it's consistent with quantum mechanics, we have to take it seriously, okay? And so I think that when the transistor was invented at Bell Labs, it was quantum mechanics. They were looking for a quantum mechanical solution, and it was a gamble, but they found it and changed the world economy as a consequence. And the same thing here. I think we have to realize that it's not inevitable that we'll have quantum computers everywhere, but highly likely. And in that case, it'll change everything. And we have to be prepared now, not tomorrow. Now, by being prepared now, I don't mean, liquidating all your assets to get into quantum computers. No, it's still early. There's time. There's still time, okay? But at a certain point, that time will evaporate, and at that point, you will go bankrupt.
Hopefully not me personally. I think I'm going to be prepared. Okay, so I think we probably have time for some questions, but
yeah.
I want to take a moment and thank you very much for being here and sharing your thoughts. Some of them are pretty mind-blowing. You all have the book. Give it a read. It's fascinating. And thank you very much. But let's take some questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I'm sure we're going to have some questions in the room, so raise your hand and let them get a mic to you, and we'll get your question. But we're going to take the first one from online here. This is to the doctor. What big question would you ask a quantum computer?
I would ask it about the theory of everything. I've been working on that. I have some ideas myself, but I would like to know whether I'm on the right track. I mean, an equation 1 inch long that will allow us to read the mind of God. That's my career goal.
When you say read the mind of God, like, would you ask it, is there a God, or how did this all begin?
No, that's the next question. The first question is hard enough.
Okay. How are quantum computers and black holes related, and what are the implications for the future uses of quantum computers in that context?
Well, just remember that the entire universe is quantum mechanical. Our common sense that we think objects are solid, things only exist in one state at one particular time, that's wrong, okay? But it's good enough. Evolution has created the brain so that it simply disregards all the trappings of the quantum theory. It takes an average, and for the most part, it led to our success as an evolutionary creature. So evolution has given us a brain that is non-quantum. But we have to resist that. We have to go to the basics of this, which is the multiverse. And that's where physics, chemistry, biology, communications is going to go. Already the transistor was one of the first examples of the multiverse. But now we're going right into the multiverse, dropping the transistor and going toward quantum computers. And so I think we have to get into the time frame that everything is quantum mechanical. You, me, the universe. And everything that we think is non-quantum mechanical is an illusion.
In the room, do we have any questions? hold on, let us get a mic to you.
Thank you so much. The information is very impressive. During actually the early internet, we connected computers to each other using a software protocol known to be like TCP. So I'm a big believer when that was created, there was no security in mind. And unfortunately, this is causing a lot of problems for us now, which is many, many years later. So what do we need to do in quantum computing when we connect them together to avoid running into such a problem again?
Well, all technologies in hindsight, we can see that even though the best intentions created the technology, that mischief makers, deviants, criminals, what have you, will try to take advantage of this thing. So now is the time to think about these things, because now it's quiet. People haven't caught on to it yet. And now is the time to think about that if you have the mind of a criminal, okay, what would you be doing to sabotage this whole thing? What would you be doing to try to siphon off money and secrets and things like that? And in other words, if you want to steal the crown jewels of another country, is this the way to do it? How would you steal the crown jewels? Now is the time to think about all these things, because we have time. Because once quantum computers hit the market, okay, it's going to be chaos. Everyone's going to be wondering about this technology. Look at chatbots. Chatbots, the basics of it was around for years, but only now have people caught on to it that it can affect your life. But the thinking process took place years ago. So now is the time to think about that. What happens when the bad guys want to get a hold of this technology? Because they're not stupid either.
I think we have another question down front here.
What do you see as the near-term horizon for the quantum communications?
Long-term what?
The near-term horizon in terms of quantum communications.
The short-term, well, not much. It's kind of primitive right now. There's really no necessity for that much quantum communication. There's not much urgency. But, you know, once somebody gets a quantum computer, then everyone's going to jump in the game. And that's why people are jumping the game now, to be one step ahead of the game. So right now, it's still pretty quiet. But watch out. You know, once people raises the number of qubits that they can use to factorize a number, there's going to be chaos. But now it's pretty quiet.
We have another question online here. Do you think that quantum computers will be able to map reality by tracing the motion and interactions of every particle in the universe, or do you believe there is fundamental randomness at the bottom that we'll never quite understand?
Well, infinity is a very big number, and the universe has lots of particles in it, so we can only discuss averages, and that's called statistical mechanics. We look at averages in order to calculate the motion of air masses, of the atmosphere, of volcanic eruptions and things like that. Thermodynamics is based on the idea that we have a finite number of particles, but it's a very large number. So I don't think we'll ever reach that point. We can't even count the number of stars there are in the universe, okay, let alone the number of atoms in the universe. So I think we have a long ways to go before we can answer questions like that. Like, you know, what is the total information content of the universe?
I have a related question to that. In the book, you talk a lot about dark matter, and it's sort of a related challenge. Is how do you model something that's so ubiquitous, and you sort of lead to, well, there's, like any technology, there are going to be multiple generations of quantum computers, and some of these questions we just may have to be patient with. What do you think about that?
So what's the question? The question, therefore, is?
I'm not asking a question, I guess. I'm just proving that I read your book.
Well, when we talk about dark matter, we realize there's more dark matter than ordinary matter. Most of the universe is made out of dark matter. And the leading theory, though it's not provable yet, the leading theory is that it's nothing but a higher octave of the string. So that we are the lowest octave of the string. All the subatomic particles you see around you are nothing but the lowest vibration of the lowest octave. The next octave up could be dark matter. And then, therefore, physics is nothing but the harmonies. The harmonies we can write for ordinary, the lowest octave, which is us, and the next octave, which is dark matter. And then chemistry is nothing but the melodies. The melodies you can create when all these particles interact with each other. And then the universe is a symphony of all these particles that vibrate and bump into each other. And then what is the mind of God? The mind of God would be cosmic music resonating through hyperspace. That would be the mind of God.
That sounds pretty good to me. Do we have other questions?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, a huge fan, so thank you. Great to see you. The biology part of this is very interesting to me, and it occurred to me that have you put much thought around the human species changing? Because with a quantum computer, you could theoretically redevelop a human into a much higher order, maybe even make it multiverse aware as a species. And the old species of us current humans would become irrelevant because we're not efficient. So you just re-engineer the new human.
Well, that gets us into science fiction, but in principle, it may be possible to tinker with our genome. For example, what separates us from the chimpanzee? The chimpanzee is our closest evolutionary neighbor among all the organisms on the planet Earth, and only a handful of genes actually separate us from the chimpanzee. One gene involves manual dexterity, another gene involves the vocal cord, and the other gene governs brain size. So only a handful of genes separate us from the chimpanzees. So if you could then deliberately manipulate these things, it may be possible to create somebody that could survive in a different environment. Some people think about Mars. Mars has a low gravity, carbon dioxide, atmosphere, and harsh environment. But maybe genetically modify us so that we can survive on Mars. These are all things that have been talked about. But again, this is far in the future. We can barely manipulate a handful of genes, let alone the hundreds of genes necessary to survive on a different planet. But in principle, possible.
We had a question in the front.
I have a question. First of all, such a privilege to be here in your presence. Thank you for coming. I was thinking modern cryptography is based on the idea of factoring, right? And the difficulty in modern computers being able to obtain those factors. Quantum computing will render that obsolete in an instant, like you said. So what is the evolution of cryptography in quantum age? Is there something else that people are working on right now that would be just as meaningful in the quantum computing age as factoring is right now? Well,
as I mentioned, quantum cryptography is possible, and it's done by the polarization vector of a photon. It comes out of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. That in other words, if you have a pure state, all the atoms are vibrating in one way, okay? And all of a sudden, it vibrates in a different way. Coherence is broken. And that's actually rather easy to detect. And that breaking of coherence would be done by a criminal. And so once a criminal taps into your taps into your system, the laser beam immediately detects the fact that the polarization vector has changed, and immediately you know that somebody is breaking into your system. So that's what I'm saying, that quantum cryptography may be the solution to the problem of quantum computers that can be broken into, but you would know somebody's breaking into it by looking at the change in the polarization vector of a laser beam.
Got it. Thank you.
So in other words, use the quantum to defeat the quantum.
Yeah, in the meantime, so I don't know if this was hidden in your question, but in the meantime, what's being recommended by NIST and other parts of the government is, do the things we can do right now. We can double our key sizes. Importantly, we can add entropy or better sources of entropy for a symmetric key encryption, so to strengthen and lengthen the useful life of the models that we have today. And then ultimately migrate our cryptography technologies to something that is quantum resistant. And then eventually, like Professor said, we want to use quantum native technologies. But that's in the future. And we have data encrypted in the legacy manner today that we need to care about. Some of the data has a very long shelf life. So that's the way industry is approaching this.
Hold on. Hold on. Let's give you a microphone.
Yeah, I can.
We need it for the people online so they can hear.
So yes, that makes total sense. But the doctor was saying that even if you retain your traditional cryptography, using quantum methodologies, you should be able to detect if that encryption has been broken.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the key.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question here. In your book, you talk about our digital immortality, the digital footprint we now all leave behind and after we're gone. How will quantum computers play into this? And will identity theft mean something different to cybersecurity professionals in the future?
Well, there are two kinds of immortality. One is mechanical immortality, and the other one is organic, biological immortality. And so the first can be made possible by quantum computers. Already, people are sitting in front of a TV camera and talking about their life, writing an online biography of everything that happened to them. William Shatner of Star Trek fame did this, spent 4 days in front of a TV camera answering every possible question about his upbringing, his thoughts, and so on and so forth. It'll be chopped up with a software program and then put into a robot, and he will live forever, or at least his image and his thoughts and his voice will live forever, okay? Then there's the other question of whether or not you can have biological immortality. That would require at the genetic level. You would have to be able to tinker it in order to fix the genes. Now, there's something called CRISPR. CRISPR technology is a shortcut by which we could begin to modify the genetic structure. So on one hand, we have CRISPR. On the other hand, we have the protein folding problem. So we'll be able to redesign proteins as they begin to wear out. And again, this is still science fiction, but it's science fiction that's based in some reality, that we have now pathways by which we can begin to think about extending the human lifespan. It's not such an outrageous concept as it was before.
We have, Mark, go ahead.
Can you hear? Yeah. You mentioned the classic cryptography uses the long prime numbers, and the Shor algorithm can break that. Dan mentioned that NIST has recommended quantum-resistant algorithms, yet you said, the computer can solve all problems. So what makes an algorithm quantum-resistant that can solve the thing that you said couldn't be, that, you understand the dichotomy there?
Well, personally, I think that quantum-resistant algorithms is a contradiction in terms.
Okay.
It's made up. It's a euphemism, okay? Because the quantum system can break any classical system, period, okay? However, it means that you can resist the march of quantum computers by being one step ahead of a quantum computer. But sooner or later, the quantum computer will catch up to you, especially if criminals are backing it and are dedicating their equipment to one purpose, which is to break the code. So there's no such thing as a quantum-resistant algorithm. Any classical system can be broken using this technology.
Thank you. It doesn't make me feel any better, but thank you.
I have a question here. What about the political and religious implications of something like this when you start talking about, the God question and how far can this go and making us live forever?
Well, let's take it one at a time. We now know what aging is. Aging is entropy. It's the buildup of mistakes, errors at the cellular level, errors at the genetic level. We now know what aging is. And because of that fact, we can reverse entropy to a degree, okay? Genetic engineering, CRISPR technology, it's possible to fix broken genes. And that's what they're doing at Harvard, for example. And for animals, they've been reasonably successful. They've been able to double, the lifespan of certain organisms by tweaking their genes. So sooner or later, someone's going to try it with humans. But again, this is still a big question mark. There's money involved. Silicon Valley is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in a lot of these technologies because they're getting old too. And the Silicon Valley people know that you can't take it with you. And so they're bankrolling a lot of these ideas, some of them kind of cockamamie, but hey, who knows? Maybe one of them will work. So they're taking the idea of regeneration very seriously, okay? Given the fact, for example, that humans, when you have a baby, you get rid of all the mistakes that have accumulated in the baby to create a baby. That's a form of immortality. So then the question is, can you stop the clock? And the answer is yes. It turns out you can stop the clock so you don't have to go all the way back to a child. A child has very few mistakes in their genome. Adults have accumulated lots of mistakes. You can get rid of those mistakes by reversing the clock and going backwards. We do it every time you get pregnant. Every time you get pregnant, you do this. And so that's one avenue. We find that, yes, it might be possible. There's a byproduct of this, however. It turns out that a lot of these therapies that are being looked at Silicon Valley, some of them work. But one byproduct is cancer. So when you start to monkey with genes, sometimes there's a tweaking process that didn't go quite right, and cancer results. And so far, all the methods that have been looked at, do they reverse aging? Yeah. In animals, you can see that you reverse aging. But the problem is that in many of these therapies, cancer results. And so there's a roadblock there. So Silicon Valley will not become immortal anytime soon.
And I guess the rest of that question was the political implications when you start doing something like this.
Well, one problem, of course, is that as you get older, you become more conservative. And so, you're more resistant to change as a consequence. But on the other hand, if you live forever, you can have several lifetimes of experience. One lifetime, you could be an actor. Another lifetime, you could be a chemist. Another lifetime, you could be a fireman. You could live several lifetimes, not just one, if you live forever. That wouldn't be so bad.
Do we have another question in the room?
I think that's all the time we have, but I want to thank you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thank you for the book. You're going to be signing books afterwards at our networking event. So thank you, Dr. Kaku.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.